Hey friends! And I'm going to try to make this as brief as I possibly can because it was kind of a lot to take in. I went on my first trip with mushrooms. It was actually part of a healing ceremony that someone I knew was putting together, and I said, hey, I would like to take part in. I've always had a bit of a fascination with psychedelics. I never did drugs growing up. I was always like the straight edge kid. I was always the designated driver, so I never really got the chance to experiment when I was younger. But like lately, like over the past few months, I've really been getting interested in psychedelics and healing ceremonies and the amount of information that doctors have collected on using like mushrooms and drugs like that, DMT, as like a way to heal people, to cure them of depression or PTSD and things like that. I just think that that's amazing and it's incredible, and I can't believe there's so much of this research that proves that these drugs, when they're used in the right way, can lead to really good things and helping people out, and people are still like, no, all drugs are bad. So anyway, what I did, I went to this ceremony and I was really nervous. Like about 20 minutes before I left, I had not a panic attack, but something a little bit close to that, to the point where like I was panicking, and I was trying to call a bunch of my friends that had done psychedelics before to ask them and to get more information right before I left, because I suddenly, all these emotions came up about like the fear of the unknown, and I didn't know what I was getting into, and I'd never been to this place before, and I freaked out a little bit. So apologies to my friends that I called and I left sad voicemails. I went and I got there, and I did mushrooms. And it was from 6 p.m. until I think 4 a.m. or something. And I brought my journal with me, and I also brought my coloring book with coloring pencils because I thought that would be really fun. I was laying down on my yoga mat, and I had my eyes closed because I just wanted to see what I would start seeing like in my eyes, in my head. And the first things that started to pop up for me was a bunch of eyes. One image that I really remember is it was like a big cartoon sunshine, and it just had eyes over the whole thing. It was just covered with eyes, and it was just kind of floating around my head, and there were a bunch of walls with just eyes on them. And I remember looking at that and just thinking like, wow, they're coming to see me. This drug wants to see me, and it wants to see inside my mind and everything. And I was like, yeah, bring it on. Come on in. The first half of the ceremony, it was me and 5 other people, including the guy running it. And they were all guys. I was the only girl. But the first part, I just felt a lot of joy. And I felt like there was this force kind of starting to come into my head of that was looking inside, that was helping me look inside myself, which I thought was incredibly beautiful. I forgot my pen, so I used colored pencils to write in my journal. Here is a little bit of what I did, and then I also did a second page of stuff that I wrote. Remember the first kind of lesson that went through my head was keep South Africa close always, because in 2014 I did a month-long volunteer trip at a wildlife sanctuary in South Africa, and it was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. And I miss it. I really miss it. And so that was one of the things that was in my head. South Africa just keep it close, always. It's always going to be there with you. And that was really a comforting thing to understand. I'm not going to read everything that's on here because some of it is really personal. There was a moment where the guy that was running it, he brought me my own little personal bowl of watermelon, because just like cut up watermelon, because he gave us that snack right before we started the ceremony, and I was like eating most of the watermelon because I was so hungry, because I had to fast for 6 hours before I went over, and I was just like, yeah, watermelon, and so he brought me this beautiful bowl of cut up watermelon, and I was so happy when he did. He's like, Casey, I brought you a bowl of watermelon, and I was like, oh my god, thank you so much, that's my favorite. Like, I was so happy that he had brought me this bowl of watermelon. So I actually wrote down, oh my god, he brought me watermelon. One of the guys next to me, we were talking to each other, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, why don't more people do this? Like, this is everything feels incredible. Like, I just feel so great. And he's like, yeah, you could probably like walk up these walls if you wanted to. And I was like, oh my god, like NSYNC. Do you remember when NSYNC walked on the walls in that music video? NSYNC walked on the walls. I have to remember that. So I wrote down NSYNC walked on the walls. And that was kind of funny. There's a moment where I wrote, I forgot I have so much joy. There was, before I wrote that, I remember feeling like I was literally touching the divine. There was a moment in my head where it was like all white, and there was a little, kind of like a little cartoon hand reaching out, like a little black cartoon hand, and it was really thin and small, and I was like reaching towards it, and it was something so beautiful, and I was feeling so joyous, and I just remember thinking, like, this is the divine. This is something incredibly beautiful that I'm finding within myself that I haven't felt in such a long time. I forgot how much joy I could feel inside myself, and that was something that was so beautiful to me. And I was just so incredibly happy. I couldn't believe it. And I remember saying out loud, just like, I'm finding the divine, and I'm touching the divine. And it was just really, really, really incredible. There was a moment where a thought popped into my head where I was thinking about apples, and I was like, how do apples work? And I remember sitting up and saying to everyone in the room, I was like, guys, how do apples work? Like, I don't understand how they work. And everybody was like laughing, and they were all like, oh my god, apples. And then I brought out my coloring book, and I started coloring. And here's one of the pages that I had someone help me color as well. The guy that was next to me, he colored this part, and then I colored the lady. And at the top, I wrote, people should color more. And I remember writing it on top of her head because I wanted her to remember that. And I drew around her eye because I wanted to give her makeup so she'd believe that she was beautiful. So I did that. And then another page I did with somebody else was this. And I loved this guy so much, and I was telling everybody about it. I was like, guys, look at this guy. Like, he's a monster, and everybody's mistaking him for this horrible creature, but I think he's beautiful, and he's misunderstood. So I wrote down, this monster is loved. And I also wrote down, it's better to color outside the lines, but I forgot how to spell color. And I even looked at the front of the book to try to remember how to spell color, and I saw it, and I immediately forgot it right when I went back in, so I wrote chloro. And I also wrote, you can't color someone in, so don't try, just be. Which is something I wanted to really remember. And I think that was something very profound that someone in the room said, and I wanted to remember it. You can't color someone in, especially if they don't want to be, and you can't force it. So I think that was profound. And then back to the person that I was getting over, I said, I wish he'd let me in closer. And I said, I want to know him. I still miss him, but not as much. Which I think was very much, like, very helpful for me. See, there was another moment where one of the guys in the room, he was completely wrapped up in his blanket. He had this white blanket, and he had it over his head and completely over his body, so that just his head was poking out. And I remember looking at him and being like, "Oh my God, you look like a dumpling! You look like a dumpling! Ah, it's hilarious!" And he just started laughing, and he couldn't stop laughing. And then he stopped laughing a second. He was like, "I am perfection!" It was really funny. Anytime someone was crying or very sad, my immediate first reaction would be to hold their hand. And one guy, I brought Eeyore with me because I cuddled him a lot, and he soaked up a lot of tears. And one guy was really crying, like really in the depths of something that he was working through. And I held onto his hand, and I was like, "Look, you can borrow Eeyore too. Like, here." And I laid Eeyore down next to him, and he said thank you, and he kind of lifted his arm up, and I put Eeyore under his arm, and he's just like face down, holding my hand with one hand and holding Eeyore in the other. And I said, "Yeah, Eeyore soaks up tears good, so you can have him. You can borrow him." And he was very grateful, and I also let somebody else borrow Eeyore for a little while, and because I wanted to make sure everybody was okay and take care of everybody. And there was a moment where the guy running it, he came over to me. He said, "Casey, you're so giving to everybody here." And I was just like, "Oh, but I want to try to make everybody feel better. I don't want anybody to be sad by themselves." And he said, "Yeah, but you got to remember to save something for yourself." And I was like, "That's the part I always forget. I never do that." And he's like, "No, you got to save something for yourself." I know some people don't really believe in spirit animals and things like that, but I found out mine is a pink flamingo. And I always thought it was a giraffe, but it ended up being a pink flamingo, which I realized last night. And I thought that was really, really incredible for me that I was just like, "What? Why?" Like, I was so confused. Why a pink flamingo rather than a giraffe? Because I've always seen myself as a giraffe. I got really, really sad. And I was really working through something by myself, and I was like crying a lot. I was just like sobbing, and like I'm just going to read the last half of it because the first part is really depressing. But I wrote down, "No matter what I do, it will never be enough. No matter how hard I try, it's never enough. But I must keep trying. Never give up. Show the bastards what you're made of as you kick the dirt back into their disbelieving faces. You will win, and that is everything." And that to me is really powerful and something really beautiful. And when I was working through trying to heal myself from this one person, I wrote, "You can always keep the memory on your shelf, but don't let it consume your heart. Be mighty." And then the last thing I wrote down, I put, "The difference between giraffes and flamingos. Flamingos can fly." So it was really a really, really amazing experience that I went through. And we had to set an intention beforehand, not something super specific, but we had to set an intention beforehand of what we wanted to receive from these plants. And I was looking for healing and some more clarity. And I got that. This is something that I'm never going to forget. And I'm definitely going to be looking towards the future and continuing to follow this path of exploring myself. It really puts into perspective, like, it's just, there's so much more out there than the scope of yourself, if that makes any sense. It's just like there's so many layers inside your head, and it just makes me believe that there are definitely forces out in the universe. I mean, I believed it beforehand, but this like solidified my belief. Sometimes we lose sight of that inner voice, and we lose that connection with nature and like things happening around us. And this definitely really opened my eyes to something different. And I am incredibly grateful for the experience, and I look forward to future experiences. That is what I'm going to leave you with. Any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to direct them to me. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening, especially if you made it to the end of the video of me babbling. So, yeah. Thanks very much, and I'll see you guys next week or in 2 weeks. I don't know how long it's going to take me to put out a new video. So, okay, bye. Love you guys.